The Senate will today, Thursday, pass the amended 2022 Appropriation Act before adjourning for the Easter break. African Export-Import Bank set to support Nigerian fuel importation, food sufficiency. Senate confirms 4 nominees of President Buhari as executive commissioners for Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission sector regulation. Plus all edges lowers market weighs mixed supply signals. This is Business Express coming to you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA, and we are reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital. I am Leah Kating. Baba Tunde. Senators passed the 2022 Appropriation Act amended bill for second reading. National Assembly correspondent Ignatius Nko reports that the Senate Committee on Appropriations was mandated to present it at plenary on Thursday for passage.
Related matters 2020.
Less than 24 hours after the 2022 Appropriations Act Amendment Bill was read for the first time on the floor of the Senate, the legislators are giving the money bill accelerated consideration as it passed it for second reading.
Aggregate expenditure is projected to increase by 192.52 billion due to increase in personnel costs by 161.4 billion and other service-wide costs by 21.05 billion.
And part of why this amendment has been sought for is because of the issue of the subsidy. The subsidy is going at a very high speed.
Tomorrow will be our last day. We adjourn tomorrow for the Easter break. And tomorrow, the Committee on Appropriations will bring the report so that we'll consider the report and then we close.
It passed the 2022 budget of the Nigeria Customs Service of 369 billion naira.
The revenue collection of 3 trillion, 19 billion, 133 million, 200,000 and 308 naira be approved for 2022 financial year for customs and exercise.
The African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, has concluded plans to support Nigeria in fuel importation and food sufficiency as there are ongoing discussions to assist the country from the $4 billion Ukraine Crisis Adjustments Trade Financing Program for Africa, UCAPFA, launched last month. President and Chairman of Afreximbank, Professor Benedict Orama, at a virtual news conference on the $4 billion UCAPFA, which was launched on April 6, 2022, said the move is expected to help mitigate the impact of the food and fuel crisis in Nigeria due to the Russia-Ukrainian war. The UCAPFA is a program of credit facilities that the bank had developed to manage the impact of the Ukraine crisis on African economies and businesses. It was launched as program response to an urgent call for emergency intervention by member states of the bank. And still with the banking sector, 2022 Central Bank Digital Currency Global Index indicates that Nigeria, Bahamas, China, Jamaica, Eastern Caribbean, Ukraine, Thailand, Sweden, and the Republic of Korea are the top 10 countries leading the race in digital currency. The index in its second edition stated that these countries led the retail project indices of central banks globally. In the index, a digital currency is a means of payment or money that exists in electronic form. The World Bank, in its most recent report, says the war in Ukraine and the COVID-19 lockdowns in China have made developing countries' debt to rise sharply to a 50-year high at roughly 250% of government revenues. Debt vulnerabilities are particularly acute in low-income countries, where 60% are already experiencing or at high risk of debt distress. To confirm the World Bank's worry, just last week, President Muhammadu Buhari wrote to the House of Representatives seeking an increase in the 2022 budget deficit to be financed through borrowing from the domestic market, just as he also did with the Nigerian Senate. And just this week, the federal government aggregated approximately 5.2 trillion naira in debt owed her. On the program today, we will be discussing Nigeria's debt recovery and the Project Lighthouse Debt Recovery Program. Our guest is an economist, Paul Alaje, partner at SPM Professionals, who joins us virtually from Port Harcourt. Hello, Mr. Alaje. It's good to have you again. Good morning, Mr. Alaje. Mr. Lade, can you unmute your mic so that we can hear you and have this conversation?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so very much for having me.
Good morning. How is Port Harcourt this morning?
Beautiful. The beautiful city. Port Harcourt is beautiful.
Oh, great. And we hope no suits disturbing you out there.
No. That's reduced significantly.
Okay, fantastic. So the World Bank and IMF are worried about Nigeria and other developing countries, and the series of reports we've had from them just at the heels of the spring meetings, the profile, but it seems we're not worried ourselves. The president still said we need to borrow funds to fund the 2022 budget deficit. What do you think? And are we worried at all?
Well, the 2022 budget deficit is huge, over 5 trillion. The president has said the plan is to fix the gap by borrowing. And I can tell you that we are worried. We are worried because the cost of borrowing is significant. The interest Nigerian government and Nigerian people pay on borrowing is so much. So if you say we are not worried, then the economics of borrowing will worry about us if we are not worried about it. So the worry is much, and I think that Nigeria needs to start thinking of alternative. And by the way, borrowing concern is not just in Nigeria. It's fast becoming developing country phenomenon where many of us as developing countries, we need to bother with how money should be paid from. Now, government is talking about domestic markets. What is the implication? If you go to domestic market and you raise bond or treasury bills, as the case may be, so that government can have sufficient funds to meet our obligation, the immediate impact is that if you borrow from domestic market, it's going to crowd out employment. What does it mean? Monies that should have been given to private sector to expand the economy, having unemployment rate that is a bit high on one hand, with 33.1% according to the National Bureau of Statistics. If you then go to borrow money from the same market that should have helped reduce the impact of unemployment, they will be crowding out employment. That said, if you now say we borrow again, what is the cost of service? Borrowing locally is usually high. Now, the increase, the cost of borrowing puts a lot of burden on our service. And we are talking about over 2 trillion naira in terms of service. Then what should we do? The solution is we need to find a way to generate more revenue internally for federal, for states, and more importantly, for local government. So all levels of government, what people should canvass on in the coming period should be how to generate more money without putting more burden on the people.
Okay, so while we talk about the revised borrowing plan for Nigeria, you have also touched on the World Bank's projection of debt to revenue, which is seen already at about 250% in developing economies. Where does that leave Nigeria? We are in an electioneering year.
Well, it leaves Nigeria more or less on high jump because ours is inching is far beyond 50%. When you look at that, we still borrowing really high. Unfortunately, significant proportion of our crude is stolen. What could have helped to reduce the impact of reserve depletion and could also boost government revenue. Some of those oil are being stolen, according to those in authority. And if authority is speaking, we have to believe them. So for me, I think we need to do more about revenue. We need to do more in maritime. We need to do more in mining. We need to do more even with crude and non-oil sector. Central Bank has come with policy. I'm expecting policy to support the policy of Central Bank coming from Ministry of Trade and Investment, also Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. There is need for that convergence for us to have more revenue rather than looking for the easy way out. The easy way out is borrowing. For me, borrowing, those that are lending to us, they will always come back for their monies, and they will come back not just for their monies, but the interest that the monies will attract. So whether we do it locally or we do it borrowing from abroad, all have risks. The cost of borrowing locally is high. Borrowing abroad, we are faced with exchange rate risks. So we have both risks to face. So what is the solution for us? People have said, oh, but our debt to GDP is not much. GDP, when you compare that with debt service, they don't align. It's nothing. What we should be looking at is how much are we generating in revenue. So the president was right in 2018, November, December, when he laid his budget on the National Assembly at the combined session of both House of Representatives and Senate, to say the biggest challenge Nigeria is facing was not 2019 election, but how to finance this economy. And I believe the president was right. My concern now is that the answer as to how to finance the Nigerian economy has not been answered till now. Our question must be answered. We must find a way. And some of the ways I think we need, some of the responses I think we need are: how do we maximize more in maritime? How do we maximize more in mining? How do we get more? And those that are stealing our crude, how do we ensure that the commonwealth of our country is saved from the fingers of destroyers and make sure this revenue counts and it matters to every life in our country?
Okay, so while we're still remaining with your question, which is your concern, how to finance the economy. Early this week, the federal government says it has aggregated over 5.2 trillion naira as debt owed her through the project Lighthouse Debt Recovery Program. What are the implications of these findings, and how did we find ourselves in a situation where debtors are still receiving other payments from the same system?
Well, we need to be very firm. The president said that he's going to do everything possible to ensure that those who are owing Nigeria pay, which I think is a good decision. That's on one hand. We need to be very firm. We have seen the HE places. They are owing Nigeria. They need to pay up. The way Nigeria is going borrowing, there are people owing Nigeria. Nigeria just love to romance those that are owing us. Meanwhile, those that we are owing, they are not smiling at all. So if they continue like this, I call it a date with debts. And I don't know, debts will always come back to ask us to pay back. And paying back is where the issues remain. We earn in Naira, we collect taxes in Naira. How do we therefore pay those that we are owing, some of which are outside our country? And they want to get it in hard currency. They want to get repayment in hard currency. The Euro bonds of this world that we have collected, funds collected in dollars, and so on and so forth. How do we pay back? For me, I think government needs to go after those who are owing our country, and we need to do that as soon as possible so that we can make as much as possible recoveries and start offsetting some of the loans that we are owing because the burden is much. Again, we also need to look at some of the things we are spending our money on the budget. I heard in the introduction of this session where one of the members of the House of of Representatives or Senators said, one of the things that the budget, the amendment 2022 budget has been sent is because of subsidy. So the question is, should we be financing subsidy? What should we do to remove subsidy? Shouldn't we by now have functional refineries so that at the end of the day, government announce subsidy removal, we say that it is locally produced, oil is locally generated, the system is transparent to every Nigerian, and removing subsidy at that time will make a lot of sense.
Okay, while the debate about the subsidy removal or not being removed rages on already, that amendment is seeing that amount rise to about 4 trillion naira. Now, some argue that with the quantum of debts owed government, a large chunk of the money out there can be used to replace the government debts. What do you make of this line? And this money, when we recover them, should we plow them into paying subsidies?
Well, I think we shouldn't collect money and use them to pay subsidies. And if you ask me, my opinion about subsidy is very clear. Why are we borrowing? Why are we paying subsidy? We are paying subsidy because we are for dysfunctional refineries, and we have no business having dysfunctional refineries. Government is not good with running business, because to be fair on government, that is not the core mandate of government. Authority should give this to private sector whose interest is to make profit, that they know that if the refineries are not functional, profit is not going to come from anywhere. So leave the 4 refineries in the hands of private sector. We have a private sector refinery coming up in Lagos. That refinery should not come be known because it's become monopolistic in nature. But when we have other 4 refineries working, and those that want to be modular refineries, at that time when you remove subsidy, you already have sufficient supply side. So when the process of demand and supply adjudicates price, then you know that supply is sufficient, so that prices will not be unnecessarily high. This is what we should do. This is what we should have done, 20 years ago. This is what we should have done 30 years ago. This is what we should have done 4, 5, 3, 2. Even now, we still can promote policies. We can ask people to submit tenders so that we can give out these subsidies. Even if government wants to retain interest 30%, 40%, it's not bad. But it is better for us to have functional refineries than for us to have dysfunctional refineries that we keep turning around, but turns only like Baba shares. Rather than giving Nigerian revenue, rather than giving Nigeria the kind of refined oil that we need, what we have is spending billions on something that is not productive for us. And that can happen in private.
Okay. Before I let you off, Mr. Alaje, can I just quickly add this question, because I understand we don't have much time left. You have talked about 3 times about improving the nation's revenue base, and one sure way most experts will say is by working on taxes. Now, from the beginning of this year till now, we've noticed some increase in income tax from the salaries of public servants. Is that a good enough effort?
Well, increasing income tax on salaries will only mean that disposable income will decrease. When disposable income decrease, it might have sporadic effect on employment. It has sporadic effect on things that we are not wanted. What I think government should do is to expand tax brackets, because the population and the working population is significant enough. If you expand tax bracket without necessarily increasing tax rates, and this is what I think government should do. We should intensify on expanding tax bracket. Also, there are new areas that government is not taxed because the sectors are informal. Government need to find a way to formalize or to bring in within the tax net or tax bracket those informal sector that are running so much and can give much revenue to our country.
Okay, I must sincerely thank you, Mr. Paul Alaje, for always making time to join us on the program and share your wealth of experience with us and, of course, with members of the public. Do have a nice day out there.
Thank you so much.
And happy Easter in advance.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Yeah.
Happy Easter in advance.
Thank you. So next is a Surviving COVID-19 series as put together by Neka Oko.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
My name is Isa Shehu. I'm doing sewing and design. That is fashion. They're affecting our business seriously because even the customers, they don't have way to come. They no way to come. What one will do before they come ticket, it is stubbornness. Even we do, nobody can come. And there are some work one will already do and keep it so that the owners now then come with security and some people to collect their work because we don't have power to go anywhere because there is no movement. There is no movement. Even the one will sell it, no way to sell. But the one will do to customers. If they have some option to come and pick it, they will come and send some things to manage our life. The money has not come to us, but we hear from some people. And even the money was not come to us. As government share to people, we proud of that. Because not be every money can come to you. But at least if your brother have it, it's like your own. If you not get today, you can get it tomorrow. Before, anything when I get, I know they think something can happen to me tomorrow. Before. But now, definitely, if I get 10 naira, I will divide it into two. Keep it one, should be in cash. That is how COVID-19 teaches.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Expected build in U.S. oil stocks against tightening global supply. Brent futures were down 45 cents or 0.4% at $108.33 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate futures were off 69 cents or 0.7% at $103.56 a barrel. Both contracts on Wednesday had shrugged off a large build in U.S. crude inventories to end the trading session roughly 4% higher. However, experts say the oil complex is heavily focused on the short term and fears of supply shortages are crowding out that view. Meanwhile, the International Energy Agency on Wednesday warned that from May onwards, roughly 3 million barrels per day of Russian oil could be shut in due to sanctions or voluntary embargoes. We move now to the commodities market. It's been a positive week for stocks at the Nigerian market as they continue to advance. By Wednesday, they sustained the week's record where the oil share index stood at 47,367.31 points, and market capitalization also rose to 25.536 trillion naira. 391.8 million shares were traded in 5,419 deals valued at 9.95 billion naira. Top trades were Guaranteed Trust holding companies Zenith Bank and UBA. And on the global scene, Asian shares tracked Wall Street higher on Thursday, while U.S. Treasury yields eased and the dollar retreated. Buster Abel has an update.
The European Central Bank (ECB) will announce its latest monetary policy decision at noon London time. Markets are not expecting any change in interest rates just yet, but widely expect the Governing Council to adopt a more hawkish tone. European stocks are cautious on Thursday morning as investors awaited the European Central Bank's latest policy decision and tracked developments in Ukraine. Shares in Asia were mixed in Thursday trade, with mainland Chinese stocks among the biggest gainers regionally amid hopes of policy support from authorities. The Shanghai Composite was up 1.22% across 3,225.64, Hang Seng Index 0.58%, and the Nikkei also top 1.22%. US stock futures were muted early Thursday morning as investors awaited quarterly earnings results from the biggest US banks. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures traded flat. S&P 500 futures inched fractionally higher, while Nasdaq 100 futures added 0.12%. African stocks are projected towards the positive territory this Thursday, with South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 and Namibia's overall index posting gains and setting the tone as other stocks struggle to thrive. Boss said the able Business Express.
The Association of Bureau de Change Operators of Nigeria, APCON, say the widening gap between the official and parallel window is driven by acute dollar scarcity due to the continued suspension of foreign exchange sales to BDCs by the Central Bank of Nigeria. APCON, in its quarterly economy review for the first quarter of the year, expressed concerns over the inability of the fiscal and monetary authorities to address the wide parallel market and multiple exchange rates in the country. Let's see the exchange rate before we go. And of course, we end the program here. Don't forget, you should take your time and be safe out there as you go about the Easter holidays. However, we'll be here tomorrow for the same program. Have a nice day. Thank you.